Hi, thanks for joining us. We're going to be starting in just a couple of minutes here. It'll be This Is Now Bridge to a Better World. And this week, we're going to be talking a lot more about war than I intended. So grit your teeth and join us. We'll be there shortly. In the meantime, here's our tin toys. Testing 1, 2. Testing. Testing 1, 2. Testing. Oh, he's crispy today.
All right.
Shall we?
Yes, I suppose so. Interesting. Now I rummage. Okay.
All rummaged.
I'm rummaged.
This is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Tiresias. This is Zani Raven. And we have some comments on the events of the past week. And I want to start with, we'll get our lighting right here. I want to start by commenting that this is Hiroshima Day. 76 years ago today, the Truman administration, fearing the entry of the Soviet Union on an equal basis in ruling Japan post-war, actually the Soviet Union had already negotiated to bring in their troops, dismissing Japanese suits for a negotiated peace. They were even starting to give in on occupation and just wanted to keep their emperor, as they eventually did. The United States was ignoring the presence of a POW camp of U.S. prisoners in the town of Hiroshima. But the U.S. went forward and used a nuclear fission device to roast and blast 60,000 civilians and 20,000 soldiers to death in Hiroshima, Japan. And that's the world we live in. When I was preparing the show, I intended to have a range of topics, and they all got kind of crowded off to the side by the fact that there's war brewing, and we're anti-imperialists here, so I have some headlines related to that, and we will also have some comments. Dave DeCamp, writing in antiwar.com, says Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz has stepped up his threats against Iran yesterday and said Israel is ready to attack the Islamic Republic. Israel has blamed Iran for last week's drone attack on a Japanese-owned Israeli-linked ship near Oman that killed a British crew member and a Romanian crew member. But Tehran strongly denies that it was responsible. And speaking for myself, the details are a little weird. But in antiwar.com, Dave writes, when asked in an interview with Ynet if Israel was prepared to attack Iran, Gantz replied yes. The Israeli defense minister is urging other countries to take action against the Islamic Republic. He said, we are at a point where we need to take military action against Iran. The world needs to take action against Iran now. And again, speaking for myself, this when he says the world, he means the U.S. is going to be in on it. Responding to Gantz's threat, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Saeed Khatibzadeh, I should have practiced that, said Israel's behavior is only possible through Western support. Khatibzadeh, sorry about that, folks, wrote on Twitter, quote, in another brazen violation of international law, Israeli regime now blatantly threatens Iran with military action. Such malign behavior stems from blind Western support, end quote. He added that any Israeli attacks would be met with a decisive response. And the U.S. has accepted Israel's narrative and is blaming Iran for the tanker attack. On Sunday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. was working with allies on a response. He's quoted saying, we are working with our partners to consider our next steps and consulting with governments inside the region and beyond on an appropriate response, which will be forthcoming, end quotes. Meanwhile, and this is not antiwar.com's comments, but meanwhile, well, if you want to find out what Hezbollah has to say about this sort of thing, you have to use a VPN to get around the blockage, because you're not allowed to find out what Hezbollah has to say, because they're so hated by Israel and the U.S.
How does that work?
You try to pull it up and you get an error, unless you use a VPN and go through a different country. So I used Argentina in this case and pulled up the Hezbollah website. And they said that Islamic Resistance is claiming responsibility for launching 122 millimeter Katyusha rockets from Lebanese territory at an Israeli farm. And Israel said that it bombed Lebanese territory with U.S.-made jets. So, unfortunately, things are getting worse in that region. In other headlines, the climate disaster, well, is pretty obvious because the sun's red and the smoke's in the air, and you know it. Human-caused warming has led to an almost complete loss of stability in the system that drives the Atlantic Ocean currents. That's according to Washington Post. They say a new study has found raising the worrying prospect that this critical aquatic conveyor belt could be close to collapse. And if you used to listen to Ani and I in the preceding decades on the local community radio, then you know that we used to refer to this as the thermohaline circulation. And it's been known for quite some time, and it was the basis for the movie, early hokey movie, I think called Day After Tomorrow or something like that. I'll bet you know the one I'm talking about.
It was terribly hokey.
Yes. I like the wolves, though. In recent years, scientists have warned about the weakening of the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or the AMOC, which transports warm, salty water from the tropics to northern Europe and then sends colder water back south along the ocean floor. Researchers who study ancient climate change have also uncovered evidence that the AMOC current can turn off abruptly, causing wild temperature swings and other dramatic shifts in global weather systems. Speaking for myself, when they say abruptly, in this case, they actually mean abruptly rather than in geologic terms. They mean like this winter or next, maybe. And The Guardian, on the same topic, wrote that such an occasion would severely disrupt the rains that billions of people depend on for food in India, South America, and West Africa. It would increase storms and lower temperatures in Europe and push the sea level up in eastern North America, and it would further endanger the Amazon rainforest and Antarctic ice sheets. And speaking for myself, from years of reading articles about this, I also recall that it would increase heat waves in the global south, in the equatorial regions, and could lead to them becoming swiftly uninhabitable as the wet bulb temperature exceeds 95. Wet bulb temperature, by the way, is a measure of how much the human body can take, because if you put a wet cloth over a thermometer and measure it according to wind speed and humidity, you get a different reading. And when that reading exceeds 95 degrees, even with the air blowing on it, that means that human beings can't cool themselves. And this is the sort of unendurable temperature that is being discussed. Back to the war problem. Maybe you've noticed that President Biden, unfortunately, is big on confronting China. And maybe you haven't noticed that this has involved warships continually, since the election of Biden, warships continually sailing through the Taiwan Strait and by the Spratly Islands. There's a different word for those islands, and I'm not remembering it right now. Sailing close to China, between China and Taiwan, in order to show the Chinese that the U.S. might maybe militarily defend Taiwan, and definitely in order to provoke the Chinese into showing some nature of their electronic signatures so the U.S. can prepare for such a thing. Taiwan is sort of protected by the U.S. under an agreement I say more like a status in which the U.S. Says without saying that there's a good chance that it would militarily protect Taiwan, but we don't actually have a treaty that says, like the NATO treaty, that says that the U.S., for example, would defend Europe if it were attacked from Russia. South China Morning Post, which is printed in Hong Kong, says that China has sealed off part of the South China Sea for a military drill on a scale that analysts say could involve tests of carrier-killer ballistic missiles. And that's China's military answer to the U.S.'s large aircraft carriers. The drill is expected to take place between today and Tuesday, and comes as the U.S. and its allies also hold exercises in the region. In a notice on Wednesday, the China Maritime Safety Administration said general maritime traffic was banned from waters southeast of Hainan Island to those around the disputed Paracel Islands in the South China Sea during the 5-day period. Oh, that's the name of them, Paracel. Anyway, according to the Drive.com, and also quoting South China Morning Post, HMS Queen Elizabeth entered the South China Sea for the first time on Monday. The same source noted that the relationship between Beijing and London is expected to deteriorate further as Britain carries out military and economic actions that frustrate Beijing's ambitions in the region. On the British side, there's been apparently no official confirmation of the warship's presence in these waters. HMS Queen Elizabeth is currently undertaking its first operational cruise. It's a great big aircraft carrier, and it's part of Carrier Strike Group 21, which also includes several other warships. And the U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS The Sullivans and the Dutch Navy's De Zeven Provinciën class destroyer Evertsen is also there. The HMS Queen Elizabeth is embarking 8 F-35B short takeoff and vertical landing stealth fighters. I don't know why they say stealth from the UK Royal Air Force Base.
Not very
excuse me. Yeah. From the UK Royal Air Force is what I meant to say. There are another 10 of these jets on board the ships. And the upshot of all that is that Biden has been successful in getting Britain to confront China. The rest of Europe is not very interested. He's had trouble cranking up what apparently is, or is it, a decision to militarily defend Taiwan. And that's significant because the Chinese have made it very clear over and over and over, and especially since Xi Jinping has taken the premiership, that they are going to invade and take Taiwan. And there was, for a long time, the frame was, or maybe there will be a vote on Taiwan that will merge the two nations. And China considers Taiwan to be a province, has always said that. But effectively, that was not really so. Now it seems to be so because of the rhetoric on the part of the Chinese, who are saying that Taiwan is a renegade province and must be punished. So people on Taiwan who were ready to join China before are now justifiably afraid of, well, being punished militarily by China, which I suppose would run a pretty good chance of, getting your ass blown off. So
I mean, it doesn't sound good.
The whole situation is terrible. And, this is one of those rare situations where I have to say it's not all the United States' fault. I really don't think that the United States needs to defend Taiwan. I kind of hate to say that because it looks ugly. And maybe Taiwanese people want to get out of the way of a military conflict or try to make arrangements for a peaceful arrangement. But war with China is definitely on the horizon. Because the Chinese are going to do it, and there's a good chance that the United States will try to stop it. And of course, this is the nuclear era, so this is extremely bad news. And it's that much worse that it looks, at this point, it looks kind of inevitable. If I had the capacity, I would follow CNN war correspondents, because they are always magically aboard the United States Navy ships when they are ready to actually launch their missiles. So they can show that dramatic footage. You can play the Star Spangled Banner in your mind, I guess, as the things rocket off dramatically from the rocket launcher technology on the ships. Anyway, Bernie Sanders has had something to say about this, and it's worth looking up on his website. He points out that the U.S. capital flight to China over the last 20, 30 years has destroyed U.S. working class wages, or been part of that. And it has worsened Chinese authoritarianism, contrary to the rhetoric we were told that it was going to make us all richer and make the Chinese milder. The opposite has happened. Although the U.S. factory owners who got cheap labor in China have gotten richer, imagine that. Imagine the rich telling us lies so they could get richer. Well, that's the way it's been. And Sanders points out it's given them the wherewithal to compete with the USA militarily. And 20 years ago, he writes, the American economic and political establishment was wrong about China. Today, the consensus view has changed. Consensus view, that is, has changed, but it is once again wrong. Now, instead of extolling the virtues of free trade and openness toward China, the establishment beats the drums for a new Cold War, casting China as an existential threat to the United States. We are already hearing politicians and representatives of the military-industrial complex using this as the latest pretext for larger and larger defense budgets. And I like reading Sanders' text because I can just hear Sanders saying it. I believe it is important to challenge this new consensus. I won't actually inflict that on you any further. Just as it was important, he writes, to challenge the old one. The Chinese government is surely guilty of many policies and practices that I oppose, he writes, and that all Americans should oppose. The theft of technology, the suppression of workers' rights and press, the repression taking place in Tibet and Hong Kong, Beijing's threatening behavior towards Taiwan, and the Chinese government's atrocious policies toward the Uyghur people. The United States should also be concerned about China's aggressive global ambitions. Sanders writes the United States should continue to press these issues in bilateral talks with the Chinese government and in multilateral institutions such as the UN Human Rights Council. That approach would be far more credible and effective if the United States upholds a consistent position on human rights towards its own allies and partners. And speaking for myself, of course, the United States is a terrible violator of human rights within our borders. We call it mass incarceration and a police state, if we dare call it that. But returning to Sanders' text, organizing our foreign policy around a zero-sum global confrontation with China, however, will fail to produce better Chinese behavior and be politically dangerous and strategically counterproductive. The rush to confront China has a very recent precedent, the global war on terror. In the wake of the 9/11 attacks, the American political establishment quickly concluded that anti-terrorism had to become the overriding focus of U.S. foreign policy. Almost 2 decades and $6 trillion later, it's become clear that national unity was exploited to launch a series of endless wars that proved enormously costly in human, economic, and strategic terms, and that gave rise to xenophobia and bigotry in U.S. politics, the brunt of it borne by American Muslim and Arab communities. It is no surprise that today, in a climate of relentless fear-mongering about China, the country is experiencing an increase in anti-Asian hate crimes. Right now, the United States is more divided than it has been in recent history, but the experience of the last 2 decades should have shown us that Americans must resist the temptation to try to forge national unity through hostility and fear. And ironic, isn't it, that sort of demagoguery is going down under a different tone and a different name as Biden continues Trump's confrontation with China.
It comes right down to, aside from it comes right down to U.S. imperialism and the fact that we are the world police. We have seen ourselves in that role.
We're the cops of the world. Is that Billy Bragg?
No, it's actually Phil Oakes.
Oh, Phil Oakes. Yeah.
Anyway, this is nothing new. This is, and the fact that Biden continues Trump, who continued Obama, who continued Bush, who continued Clinton, who continued Bush, who continued, it's just, the beat goes on. It's U.S. imperialism by any other name, by any other administration.
It's, imperialism is one of those reasons that I say we have very little democracy. I read these things and I know that even within, this is a small audience and thank you for tuning in, but even within this little group, it's hard to know what the U.S. is up to and what the extent of it is. And that's deliberate, absolutely deliberate, and much worse over the last decade, just when you thought it couldn't get worse, especially since the invasion of Iran by the Bushes.
Yeah.
Iraq, by the Bushes. There's an absolute hostility towards journalism, and that's a hostility towards democracy and a desire to promote bloody imperial policy by any means necessary, and without the interference of having democracy break out in the United States so that people can deal with it. And that also applies to capitalism as well. If I change topics a little bit, capitalism is just not up for discussion in the United States, much less a vote. And I was thinking about that when I was looking up the top 10 polluters.
And this is actually, can I jump in here for a minute?
Absolutely.
Because I want to jump into the capitalist discussion about now. As you can plainly hear from Teresa's news headlines, things are dire, right? Things are super dire. They have been dire our entire lives. And the thing about it is they've been dire for generations before that too. And given our ability now, the thing that's changed is our ability to know what is actually going on around the world in real time. That has actually changed in our last couple of generations. First with, the television, the telegraph brought it forward some, the television brought it forward more. Now we have the internets and the Twitters, and now we can know what is happening around the world in a more or less unrestricted way. And it can be mind-numbing, right? Because now it's a lot harder to deny what is happening. It's a lot harder to deny the global deaths brought on by climate change. As Teresa was talking about, the thermohaline circulation currents giving out, which she was talking about when we were first getting together. This was one of those discussions we had in the early mid 90s of, oh man, in 25 years or so, if we don't change course, things are going to be dire. Oops. You know, when against this backdrop, we know that there's about 100,000 people. I'm sorry, let me take that back. About 400,000 people every year that are dying around the globe because of climate change right now. And those stats are actually a couple years old, so we know that that's actually gone up. Those are deaths that are primarily caused by famine, by drought conditions brought on by changing weather patterns, brought on by global warming. But we also, now know that the world's on fire, and it's not just the West. It's also Greece. It's also Turkey. It's the frickin' force in Siberia. And so what do we do? Capital has it this way, right? This is capitalism writ large. This is capitalism triumphant. Capitalism is an exploitive game. It's a fiction. Capitalism is not real, has never been real. But that game that we actually, engage in with each other has very real effects. We engage in it because we're told we don't have any other choice, that there are no alternatives, that this somehow is the best of all possible worlds. It's as if it's a process of natural evolution. And to fight capitalism is, really like fighting air currents, like fighting, natural evolution, right? It just can't be done. So in that situation, as we see there are no alternatives, as we're told that this is just the way things are, as natural as anything else, what is to be done? How can we fix it? How can we get out of this game that is a death cult, right? And so we have not only the deaths of climate change, but we also have the deaths of the workers who are exploited to death around the world. We have the deaths of the family who are ground in poverty under the wheels of capitalism, right? Capitalism just rolls on. Why does it roll on? So Bezos can fucking put himself in space, right? So that we have the winners of the game who can do whatever the hell they want, and the rest of us are down here scrambling for crumbs. I say it's time to change the game. I've got a lot more to say about this stuff, but I realize I just hijacked, and I want to. I want to.
This is a terrific way to take this conversation forward, because I wanted to say that there's a parallel between imperialism and capitalism in the United States, in that it's considered to be, by the people who actually act on this, by the very small groups of people who have the power, your comments, your opinion, and even your awareness are very definitely not welcome. For example, one of the most basic things I could do if I'm talking about what's happening in terms of U.S. preparing for war, which you would think that you had some democratic right to even know about, is where the aircraft carrier groups are. This is one of the most significant ways that the U.S. projects its military power around the world, is aircraft carrier groups, which is at least one aircraft carrier and dozens of other ships and submarines that surround it and go as a war-making capacity wherever the U.S. wants to send it. By the way, which is a very polluting, very, very polluting effort. And that is blocked in the United States. Now, the U.S. Navy intentionally prevents tracking where their aircraft carriers are, and will not say, and will not allow U.S. websites to track it. And so to track that, again, I have to get on the VPN and go find a Russian site or something to figure out where the hell the aircraft carriers are. It used to be as easy as just clicking on. Not anymore. Likewise, with capitalism, they don't even want you to know who they are and how huge they are and how much money they have, because discussing the idea that you should not be ruled by these princes and emperors and dukes and duchesses of the billionaires of the capitalist world is not allowed. It is absolutely something that If you look at what the U.S. actually does and the intent of operations such as, say, COINTELPRO back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, has a different name now. Wherever
A spy program by any other name.
yeah, wherever there is a possibility of a substantial section of the United States becoming aware of and acting against imperial war and corporate hegemony, it is slapped down. That's why Judy Berry was blown up by a shill for the FBI. But that's just the one of the more that hidden thing is one of the more visible parts, I'd like to say. Right now, the corporations very much want you to believe that you are guilty for global warming. That if you just disciplined yourself and rode your bicycle more, and used the new green, if you paid more into the green electric bill, this is one of the things I really hate, then it would just make the world a better place. Well, it can't and it won't, and it's not your fault. And I want to get into some of the details of that, just how gigantic emissions are from the top polluters. And get this, you've never heard of them. I almost guarantee it. And this is when I say you, not just you few who are watching right now, but I'm conscious that unlike a radio broadcast, I'm speaking over time to whoever tunes this in. Hello there.
They
Over the next
already.
week or so. Yeah,
You
I know.
don't need to tell them.
Well, I'm framing what I want to
I'm
say
teasing.
here. And the number one greenhouse polluter, according to the site that tracks that, darn, I didn't write down the name of the site anyway, is Vistra Energy. Have you ever heard of Vistra Energy? Vistra Energy owns power plants. And
I think Vistra is the name of the lizard companion in Doctor Who, in the 10th Doctor.
well, if it breathes fire and
Or, I'm sorry,
destroys,
11th Doctor.
does it breathe fire and
No,
destroy worlds?
she's actually kind of nice.
Oh, well, it's propaganda then. Anyway, Vistra Energy has power plants all over the place, coal power plants, gas, even diesel, all kinds of things. And, for example, there's a Vistra plant in Paris, Texas. Paris, Texas is a godforsaken little lynching town on the northern border of Texas near Oklahoma. And Vistra Energy, the power plant there, which supplies Dallas and the region, is one of the largest employers. And it is part of Vistra's emissions. In 2018, they put out 118 million metric tons of CO2 and greenhouse gases. Duke Energy is number two. Maybe you've heard of Duke because they occasionally, get out their dukes and try to knock down whoever is opposing their pipelines. Southern Company is number three with 96 million metric tons per year and that is also mostly power plants. It's the power plants that take up most of the top 10 in terms of U.S. and global polluting. They put out millions of metric tons of CO2 gas, and you're part of it, of course, whenever you turn on your lights, turn on your dishwasher, just do your life. But things are not set up so that you can participate in the society or even really survive without doing this. So it's not down to you. It is about the billionaires who run these corporations. The fourth is Berkshire Hathaway. Maybe you've heard of that. Warren Buffett. Well, they don't just invest. They have gas systems, mineral, metals, chemicals, and power plants. American Electric Power is the fifth one. And the sixth one is the U.S. government, a major polluter, putting out 51 million metric tons, doing things like running their jets in the air to frighten the Chinese. Xcel Energy puts out 51 million metric tons, power systems. NRG Energy, isn't that cute? That's one of them. Calpine is number 9 on the list. They put out 40 million metric tons per year. And for example, one of those is you're using their power right now, listening to me if you're in the Portland metro area, through the Hermiston Gas and Electric Plant, which puts out 1.4 million metric tons per year into the atmosphere. Dominion Energy is number 10, and ExxonMobil is number 11. So it's a little surprising that by the time you get down to a really familiar name, you're already 11 down on the list. Marathon Petroleum's number 16. Amarin Phillips 66 is number 20. And all of these, again, put out millions of metric tons of pollution. So they are going to go on and they're going to do their thing. And you're not welcome to know about them. And certainly you're not welcome to interfere in what they do. And in this, their level of power, and I guess I'll just stick with level of power. Their level of power is similar to feudal times. You were not to know, when you were a serf in the Middle Ages, you were not to know what went on in the castle. You just brought your hay and your animals there when they were called for, and you went to war when they told you to. And why was not to be questioned or even for you to know. And the more things change, the more they stay the same. We are far more wealthy, and yeah, we have more freedom than a serf in the Middle Ages. But when it comes to actually,
it feels like we have more freedom than a serf in the Middle Ages.
Right. I mean,
we don't have more leisure time. I'll point that out.
Yeah. I mean, like you can have a democratic. Hey, is that like necrotic democracy?
It's a lot like that.
You can have a democratic fight over, say, let's pick a topic, abortion.
Sure.
And it's very, very heavily influenced by these huge power holders. You know, what they decide has a lot to do with how that's going to go through. But when it comes to challenging pollution, when it comes to stopping the utter destruction of the planet, and when it comes to stopping the threat of war and or nuclear war, you've got nothing. You don't have democracy. Your opinion accounts for almost nothing. That said, there are things to do. And people have prevailed from time to time in really titanic struggles. For example, the nuclear atmospheric test ban was brought about largely by women in the 60s and 50s and 60s. And one of the big things that changed public opinion and actually got the United States to budge on that was people collecting the teeth of their children and having a great pile of those collected and analyzed. And it turns out that people my age still have radioactive strontium in their bones. It affects how our bones grow. It affects whether we get bone tumors. And back in the 60s, I remember that that sort of pollution killed off a friend of mine. Her name was Becky. And people stood up against it. So it can be done, but not just by following the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. That's to keep you thinking that you're participating. When it comes to basis, frankly, we need revolution. And I'm conscious saying that on this medium is different from saying that on People's Community Radio. And I feel lucky that I was able to do that for decades and get those ideas out there, because it's pretty obvious to us now that we were pretty easily silenced on these social media forums, which are privately owned. They should be regulated as public utilities, which is certainly what they are. But we're not there yet.
Janet suggested that we share contact information for our reps. And I have that. I can type it like mad into the live chat while Teresa talks. I don't know how distracting that noise might be. Ron Wyden, I can also just read them out loud now and slowly. I'll do that for a moment. I also want to encourage people to go ahead and look them up online so you can email them directly. Everyone has a little contact form on their websites. But Ron Wyden, his phone number is 202-224-5244. Jeff Merkley is 503-326-3386. Now, I'm going to say that Jeff Merkley is probably one of the better allies that we have in, certainly in the Senate. He is actually quite good. I have been impressed in many ways with Merkley and his ability to stand up to nonsense. So that said, bolstering those that are doing right is always good. Wyden, generally good, right until we get to Cuba. Anyway, so those are our two senators. Earl Blumenauer, 503-235-3399. That's Earl the Pearl Blumenauer, 503-235-3399. Peter DeFazio, down in the Eugene, Roseburg area, 202-225-6416. Cliff Bentz, who's in Eastern Oregon, couldn't find his phone number easily on the website. They wanted my zip code and stuff before. Hey, well, there was a lot of hoops. Anyway, Cliff Bentz, look him up. Susan Bonamici, her phone number, 503-469-6010. That's 503-469-6010. And Kurt Schrader, he's, let's see, Oregon City and Salemish, I think. Is that right? Kurt Schrader, 503-557-1981. 503-557-1981. And so those are the Oregon delegates. If you live in another state, and I know at least one of you do, sorry, I did look up Washington. But please do and find that contact information and encourage people to actually contact our Congress critters. It's important that they actually feel that they have people that they're representing and not just the huge lumps of cash that are shoveled at them during election times.
I want to return to the war. No, I want to return to the war situation, if I may. There's some substantial differences between confrontation with Iran and confrontation with China. As y'all know, there's been a threat of confrontation, serious confrontation with Iran for decades now, and it's very profitable. It builds up the war industry, and you've been justified in not taking it very seriously in terms of actual invasion or major bombing of Iran, because obviously that didn't happen for the past 3 decades, even though it was very useful to lead the American people to hate Iran and to sing "Bomb Bomb Iran," as Senator Warmonger, what's his face from Arizona.
I think Senator Warmonger, what's his face, is just fine.
It did, and McCain. So there are reasons for that. Iran has a huge mountainous territory, and the U.S. ain't invading. But China is something that's cranked up over the last few years from the Trump administration into the Biden administration. Biden seems to be hugely enthusiastic about it. As I was saying before, your opinion is not welcome on this, but since it is unwelcome, I would like to encourage you to make it known that right now, for example, the Chinese are retrofitting their commercial fleet with helicopter pads and troop quarters. That's because they need about 1,000 ships. This is how big this war is going to be. I hate to say is going to be, but I don't see anything stopping it right now. And they want to take Taiwan. It's a huge propaganda point for them. It's utterly pointless and horrible for them to do this. But they intend to. They fully intend to. And they're looking for a sign from the U.S. as to what the level of response would be, but they've decided to go forward in any event. And so the U.S. has been putting these ships in there. And the reason China is having a practice right now with their missiles is because they believe that they can sink U.S. aircraft carriers with them. And they do have tremendous missiles with tremendous power, non-nuclear, I should add, for the most part. And these things skim over the ocean, pop up, zigzag, and then hit the aircraft carrier with a tremendous amount of ordnance. And the U.S. thinks, oh, well, we can shoot those down. Well, maybe you can't shoot down 20 at a time. And on the other hand, maybe if you can shoot down a few of them, and only a couple of them hit the aircraft carrier, well, they're so huge that they won't sink. But if that sort of thing comes down, it will be hard to stop a nuclear war, and nuclear war, well, that's it. That's the end for us, and this is what we're up against. This is why I'm emphasizing that this needs to be brought into the public consciousness, that this sort of thing is being flirted
Threatened.
with right now.
Threatened.
Threatened right now. Your
When-
life is being threatened by Joe Biden.
When people say flirted with in terms of war, I think it's a threat. It's, you can't really just tickle it a little around the edges. It's like, what is implied? It's imminent death. And this gets back to us being a death cult, right? The US is a death cult. Capitalism is a death cult. And I'm gonna sneak on in here again.
Yeah.
Okay. I had mentioned earlier that nothing to be done about it attitude, because we are sold from the cradle that this is the only way things can be. This is the natural order of things. This is the best of all possible worlds. Out of our millennium of development as a species, as a planet, we are the pinnacle. We are the crown of creation, right? And so this is obviously hogwash and malarkey. And I think that, kitty, indeed. I think you have hit one of the questions on the head.
What do they say?
That really exposes our hypocrisy. Why are we trade buddies with China and still so cruel to Cuba?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's hypocrisy. Obviously it's around capitalism and markets. And, sure, China is an ostensibly communist nation, but their workers surely don't have rights. And so their workers have been open to capitalist markets for years. It exposes, it really does expose the lie. So thanks for throwing that question into the chat. I really, and thanks for everyone for your chatting this morning. It gives a wonderful community presence to the show, and growing good community is really my goal for doing this live stream every week.
Yeah, I like that interactive aspect. And, again, comparing with radio, that's so much better.
And so one of I guess I wanted to talk a little bit more about that nothing to be done attitude, because when it comes right down to it, and this does one of those things that kind of blows minds, capitalism is a fiction, right? And the more that we can reinforce that message to each other, it's a fiction that has very real results. It's kind of like baseball, right? Baseball is a game we made up. It did not naturally evolve. It is not the pinnacle of all games. It is just a game. People one afternoon decided, oh, let's do it like this, right? We've got rules now. We've got a game to play. If you say whack that ball super hard and it goes flying into the face of the person trying to catch it because they have wretched depth perception like myself, and it smacks them square on the cheekbone, they're going to get a black eye. It's a very real consequence of a game that's been made up. Capitalism is a game we've made up. It has very real consequences for the people that are suffering under its effects, and that's the lot of us, as well as the rest of the planet and all of creation. But it's a game, and we can change its rules. We can say there's a better way of doing things. We can say we figured out something else, because Christ knows there's got to be a better way of doing things, right? The way that it's been done is grinding us. Those of us in the more higher income countries, those of us in the States, for example, the resource users and extractors, we have a soul death about it. We're not, perhaps most of us perhaps are not at risk of the same consequences of capitalism, the dire consequences that we see around the world in the lower income nations. But we are surely made miserable by its effects. We are surely ground, and our humanity is surely robbed from us. So is our sense of wonder. We don't have time to really talk with each other on a deep level. We don't take that time because we're tired from having to work and hold down two jobs that pay us inadequately to support our families, right? Another thing is because of the pollution and the light pollution, there are places where we never see the sky, we never see the stars anymore. There are places where there's really nothing but concrete and strip malls, and you don't see birds and trees, right? These places exist, and it strips us of our wonder. And basically, this capitalist system, this death cult that Teresa was talking about earlier, it kills us slowly and surely. It kills our soul. Aside from it just being bad for us physically and killing us on that level, for sure. You know, the U.S. has the lowest life expectancy of any of these so-called developed nations. So there's the physical grinding, but also the death cult of capitalism kills our souls. It kills our sense of wonder. It creates cynicism and misanthropy. And misanthropy is a very, very dangerous thing.
Yeah, the people in the bunkers, the billionaires who have the bunkers who can survive all of this nonsense I've been talking about, they're not suicidal, they're homicidal.
Yeah, absolutely.
The people who don't matter, you and me,
absolutely
are going to die.
Absolutely. And so the misanthropy, though, it's beyond them. It's beyond Bezos and what's his face, Elon Musk, and whatever that British guy's name was. It's beyond them. It gets to that meanness that is so often present when we are, if you go to a county fair and you see people wearing shirts that just say "people suck," right? And you hear this attitude that, well, people suck. It's not just at county fairs. It's that attitude of anyone that doesn't totally agree with me totally sucks. And anyone that agrees with me, well, they're okay maybe while they're agreeing with me. And I see how we got here. But misanthropy kills our sense of compassion, right? It diminishes our humanity. And so it's so important to remember that we are sacred beings, that people are sacred, that we are a part of this amazing web of life that sustains all, right, on this planet. And it's important to tap into that sense of awe and that sense of wonder. It sustains us as we fight the never-ending wars, as we face the emergency that is the climate catastrophe, to actually remember what's real. And what's real are our human connections and our planet that we live on and that web of life that does sustain us. Those are the real things. So how can we support that? How can we support each other in tapping into our sense of wonder and our sense of connection? That's, I truly believe, what we need to do and where we need to go. We need a campaign of wonder and awe. We need to support each other and uplift each other in finding some positive, good things to be grateful for. And I'm not being Pollyanna. Everything Teresa said earlier is absolutely true, and we must throw ourselves on those gears and stop the cruelty, stop the pollution, stop the resource extraction, stop the wars.
Yes, direct action that does it, and it's collective action. These people who are making tiny little family enclaves to survive a logistical collapse are kidding themselves. It's cooperation with a community that is going to allow you to survive the bullshit that is coming.
Indeed. And so finding each other and building that community and linking arms and finding out how we can skill share and how we can overgrow this system. I think that's what we need to do. The system is killing us. And so let's make it irrelevant. Let's do something else. Excuse me. And so where do we go? What do? We need love and kindness. we need to reach across the table to friends and family that, maybe don't think in these terms, and talk to them when you hear cynicism, when you hear misanthropy, when you hear things like, well, what are you going to do? It's just the way things are. Can't fight City Hall. Right? It's important for us to uplift and encourage, because Jesus, after the Trump era, we are totally beaten down. But, it wasn't so great before that either, right? So, goodness.
I feel a terrible concern for young people. I feel like I've gotten to live my life in a world that is not subject to global warming. And, we've always been threatened by thermonuclear war, but it hasn't happened. Thank the gods, or thank the Soviet colonel who stopped it in the 60s. And I want somehow to connect with people in their teens and 20s and 30s who are very much the victim of this system that has grown up around us, and who, as I was saying, like everyone else, are unaware of the fact that these terrible plans are being made, and the fact that this hegemonic strength by the polluters is unassailable at this point. People think that we are able to move against it by voting. Well, for that to happen, there would have to be a hell of a lot more direct action. So I'm down with direct action. The real heroes these days are the people who are stopping those pipelines, I think.
I think that they are amongst the heroes of today. There are people doing direct action around the world to stop development projects that are harming the earth, and to bring attention to human rights.
So we've got to stop war with China too, because
all of it.
That'll screw up everything.
Yeah, all of it. And so we live in a state of emergency. How do we prioritize? It's important not to get overwhelmed, because when you start, we need to stop this, that, and the other thing. It's true, we do. But each one of us can't do all of it. And so it's important to find our part in the choir, as it were. It's important to find out, to find more what we do. And I remember a speech given by Winona LaDuke, or maybe it was an interview in the 90s. She's an amazing activist. She spoke about how each person has a unique part to play. And so in order not to be overwhelmed and thereby made ineffective, it's important to recognize what you have the most passion for, because that passion is going to have to sustain you through very, very, very difficult actions, and through the expansion of the expenditure of a whole lot of energy. And so what are you most passionate about? Is it saving wetlands? Is it preserving species? Is it human rights? Is it anti-racist? Is it anti-capitalist? Find that thing that drives you. Is it spreading compassion and understanding? Find that thing that drives you. And that's sort of your niche in the overall, because it is a state of emergency and there are too many things that need happening all at once. And so if we all go to where we are most called, we can trust that other people are taking care of the other pieces of that emergency. Because to try to take it all on, each and everything ourselves, is to invite burnout and is to be ineffective. And we cannot afford burnout or to be ineffective. Then there is another overlay that I'm kind of getting used to. I think it's a good overlay. I don't know who started this, but it's the overlay of figuring out which part you play in turning things over. And it's an analogy of a butterfly with 4 lobes. And so one lobe are the direct action people. They're the iconoclasts. They're the ones that say, this cannot be anymore. This is not sustainable, and therefore it will not be sustained. We will stop it now. Those are the direct action. Those are the folks that are stopping pipelines. Those are, direct action gets the goods folks. Then there are the people that are inspiring, that are building, that are showing new worlds. the writers and the artists and the poets, those of us that are trying to say there could be a better way of doing things, that capitalism may not be the only alternative, right? That there is a world in which we can share, a world in which we honor ourselves and the life of the planet that sustains us, a world where we emphasize harmony and beauty and pleasure over punishment and corruption and exploitation. So we can dream up that world and give that vision to those that then build it and make it so, the teachers and the architects, the ones that actually um, uh, create the infrastructures. And then there are the healers, those of us who are dealing with the trauma of the world that's been broken, as we are trying to get through this um, capitalist system that grinds us. There are that is also a very real need to find people that can guide and help and heal and soothe, so that we can stay engaged and active and get going again and again. And so um, we have to engage all of us, all of us. It takes each and every one finding our place, knowing what we are doing, and going forward, because it is a huge task. We are trying to save the world. The world is literally on fire, right? And so, um, at this time, as we are just past Lammas and moving into the fall, moving into a time of balance, it's important that we check in with ourselves and really see what our parts are, and what we're going to need moving forward, because it's time to gather in. It's time to create good, lasting communities. Of course, winter is coming in a very literal sense, but as Teresa was mentioning, there are some very critical times ahead, and we really do need each other. So let's connect. Let's keep connected. It's important to remember that power is held in cycles. This is sort of the lesson of Lammas, of Lughnasadh, of the pagan holiday that's just passed. Lughnasadh talks about the sacrifice of the Sun King, because you can only deal with so much power before it becomes all-consuming, before it corrupts. And so that would be the pinnacle of the sun's power on solstice. And then at that pinnacle, knowing that there is no more to be gained that is good, the sun sacrifices himself and imparts the power into the grain, and the grain keeps us all alive for the next cycle, right? So that's the sort of myth boiled down to, a half a minute. Boiled myths, my specialty. But it's that sort of sacrifice, that sort of cyclical sacrifice, knowing that no one person should hold huge lumps of power forever. That power is something that must be rotated and must be shared. And that's one of the lessons of Lammas moving forward. And with that, I have a little tarot.
Well, let's have some tarot.
Shall I have a little tarot? It's an important time to remain spiritually grounded. Oops. My tarot cards in that light, they don't like each other so much. Well, yes, I dropped that directly on the disconnect button. Let's try maybe doing, I don't know, that. Okay, well, anyway, it is the High Priestess. And it is a card that talks about really maintaining a spiritual connection, and finding either somebody that can help you get connected, or finding that connection within yourself, and knowing that you don't need an intermediary necessarily to be deeply spiritual. You can be your own spiritual authority, but that deep spiritual connection is pretty important for sustaining you right now. I got the 5 of flamingos in this deck. Yes, I used the Alice in Wonderland deck because I thought I needed a little levity this morning. And the 5 of flamingos, otherwise known as the 5 of swords, is a card that actually talks about things being about as dire as they can get. It's conflict. It's bad, right? It's I think everything Teresa was mentioning earlier. It is the death cult of capitalism. It is kind of a showdown, if you will, but it's not a good showdown. It's cruelty. It's conflict, and it's not a conflict with any kind of honor. And I see it really as the death cult of capitalism. And so the solution, I asked, how can we get around this? How can we move through the energy that is the 5 of swords, or the 5 of flamingos? And I drew the sun. And again, the sun is about expansiveness. It's about joy. It's about the high seat of power used in all the best ways. It is power it is expansive good times. And so what I see in these cards is that things are as bad as we think they are. There's no sense lying to ourselves or each other. And that the only way through it is to hang on to each other and to love each other and to take pleasure in our days and to engage and to keep engaged and to stay engaged and to stay grounded, knowing that we really do need something. We need to remember that the world is real and has meaning, and that the fiction is the games that we play with each other, like capitalism. And so I said, okay, but what else? It feels like there should be one last thing to think about. And so, of course, I drew the death card. And in this deck, of course, it's the Queen of Hearts. But as the Queen of Hearts would yell off with their heads, no one ever actually died, right? So is the sort of lesson of this death card. This talks about cyclical transformation and regeneration. It's not about physical death. It is about making things wholly new and calling a cycle good and starting again. And so that seemed perfectly appropriate. And I stopped pulling cards at that point.
When you say engage, I want to ask for engagement for all of you who see us and heard the information, and maybe you've heard about it from other sources. There really is a terrible danger of war with China breaking out at any moment right now, simply because both parties have brought all of their toys together, and because, frankly, the Chinese will not budge on invading Taiwan. They intend to. They're going to do it. The question is, at this point, I think there's some slight possibility that the American people could wake up to it in time for there to be some engagement in a pseudo-democratic sense or a slight democratic sense. I mean, the question is, say, do you want to go to war with China? I'd like to ask some people that. How do you feel about going to war with China today? It would be interesting to see how people react to that. Of course, you're not to know. And it's going to be sprung on you. It'll be like the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Oh, today China attacked viciously and without warning for no reason. It's not the truth, but that's how they push us along into these horrible conflicts. And I want that nonsense to stop. That's part of, public awareness is a huge reason why we never went to war with Iran. I say they're not going to do it because of the mountains. Well, crazier things have happened. I mean, Afghanistan is just as bad, just as stupid. And the United States invaded Afghanistan because we're all bamboozled by the explosions downtown, as one wag had it. That's George Carlin said that, I think, referred to 9/11 as the explosions downtown. It's no reason to go to war. Never was, but that horrible war happened. Well, Afghanistan never had the capacity to blast this city into radioactive fragments, and China does, and China's allies do. So this is a terribly serious situation, and I would like to ask you to engage on social media and just start asking questions and get people thinking about the fact that they're being pushed into war with China, that it's a real danger, and that, of course, we need to stop it if we possibly can.
War is never the answer. War is never the answer. And I think with that, we have probably come to the end of our
little podcast. Well, thanks for
episode.
tuning in. I'm going to do this one up for SoundCloud again. I did last week's, so we're back on SoundCloud, and I think I'll trim this one a little better than I usually do.
Please do subscribe to our channel. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, and leave your comments. Hit the notification bell, and keep those cards and letters coming.
And we're on Twitter.
You can follow us in the Twitterverse at Bridge2Utopia, Bridge2Utopia. You can also find us on Instagram, where you'll see us. We call it "This Is Now," Bridge to a Better World. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please do help us spread the word of this live stream, coming at you at least once a week, every Friday morning, live at 9. Though we do threaten occasionally to upload other videos at other times. It could happen. And do take care of yourselves. We love you.
Our love goes out to you and all the ships at sea.